watching who wins this year's MVP. There are 4 super legitimate candidates, and you see the odds on your screen according to ESPN Bet. Joe Burrow, as you see, well behind the leaders at 16-1. Last night, Troy Aikman on Monday Night Football said he would vote for Burrow, as did Micah Parsons, who expanded upon his reasoning on his podcast.
He, without a doubt, should be MVP. I think if you ask anybody in the league right now, this ain't just me. We talked about it in the locker room. We said Joe Burrow was the best quarterback we faced. And we played Lamar this year. You can ask anybody on the team. We said Joe Burrow was the best quarterback in the National Football League this year, without a doubt.
Just the fact that he thinks that he should be saying those things is fascinating to me and delightful. Thank you, Micah. Yes. Please keep the opinions coming. But do you agree, Domonique Foxworth?
I don't agree. I think that there's 2 legitimate front runners that either one of them, Allen or Lamar Jackson, get it. I'm fine with that trophy going to one of those guys. I don't think Joe Burrow is a realistic contender because while we do change the criteria from year to year, there's some things that we kind of accept as being true about being the MVP. It'll be really unusual for the first time ever that we take a quarterback who's playing great on a team that's not going to make the playoffs. Right. That to me feels like so far out of the tradition that it feels like it's unfair to the history of
What if he makes it? Would it change it to you? Is it relevant if he makes it?
The problem with him making is then we start focusing on team success, and then you look at the other quarterbacks who are having equally, arguably better seasons and have more successful teams. It just so happens that sometimes, because of all the other circumstances around, a great quarterback having a great season just doesn't deserve the MVP. And I think that's the way that it works out for Joe Burrow right now. And the same thing could be said for Saquon. I'm sorry. Even if you break the record, just so happens that we have 2 of the greatest quarterbacks likely in the history of the league having their best seasons right now. One of those guys got to get it.
Maybe 3. You could argue Burrow is having his best season, too. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, look, I respect Domonique, but who am I to argue with a coalition that includes Troy Aikman and Micah Parsons? That is a wide range. So, look, I think Burrow is the most valuable player in the league. I think those words, most valuable, right, which get us in all kinds of trouble when we debate this, right, because it doesn't mean best and it doesn't mean on the best team. They've won 8 games. I believe without Joe Burrow, if you put another quarterback in there, given the way their defense has performed this year, there's a chance they would have won 0 games. And I think that's kind of the definition of most valuable. He has 8 straight games where he's gone over 250 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. That's insane.
It's by far the record, too. The record had been 6.
So he's playing the best. Now, I am a hypocrite, right? Because when I used to vote for MVP in Major League Baseball, when I was a baseball writer, you had to make the playoffs to win it for me. So I don't vote for the NFL MVP, so I can be a hypocrite here. I don't actually have to follow through on what I'm saying. But I think if you look at the words most valuable, those 3 guys, I'm not counting the running back, those 3 quarterbacks, I'll make.
You made so many points that I want to fight against, but I know Tim.
Let me get Tim in here. Tim, if you want to vote, we could put the picks up on the screen. Yeah. I know. Go ahead, Tim. Jump in.
Well, I just going to say, look, you take Saquon off the Eagles, they wouldn't win as many games as they won. Same thing with that argument that you would win fewer games if you take these MVP candidates off of that team. Of course, that would be the case with Lamar and Baltimore everywhere. I guess. When I look at it, I do think you need to make the postseason. I do think you also have to look at, how the team is built. The reality is, Joe Burrow is an awesome quarterback. He's having a great season. Their defense isn't very good, and they basically are paying 2 number 1 wide receivers. Like most guys don't have that. And so you got a bad defense with 2 number 1 wide receivers. You should have really good numbers. That should happen just because of the dynamic of that. So I think that is something you have to consider when you're just focusing, on the numbers, in terms of the stats and what he's accomplished. Okay, bad defense, 2 number 1 wideouts. How your team is constructed does impact the type of production you have statistically.
Fair enough. Two things. One, I did not say because they would win fewer games without him. I said they would win 0 games without him, and I don't think that's true of the other guys. Yeah. Number two, like, it's not just looking at the numbers. Like, watch Saturday's game. Yeah. He had 3 game-winning drives in one game.
The best argument for Joe Burrow is that it felt like his coach was working against him. One of those number 1 wide receivers was fumbling balls that hurt against him. The kicker missed a chip shot. Like, the argument is he not only is the most valuable player against the defense, he's the most valuable player against his own teammates in certain situations. But it still doesn't change the fact that this team is not good enough. And we've never done that before.
That's true.
If you want to open that up, that changes the context for the award going forward. So we can give it to, I think one of the more interesting things about this for me, for Josh Allen, is if Patrick Mahomes wasn't as good as he was in late game situations and the Bills had the 1 seed, I think this is a no-brainer. We're talking about a quarterback who's having a historically great season for himself on a number 1 AFC contender. The fact that they're 2, it shouldn't matter, but it does matter to the way that we watch all of this stuff. And it's funny to me that these ancillary things that have nothing to do with the player themselves are going to have a huge impact on who wins the award.
And look, historically in all sports, maybe a little less in football than the others, but there is a narrative element to all of this.
Of course.
An element of whose turn it is. Yeah. And I feel like it's Allen's turn, and I think that's part of the reason. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. Everyone wants to dive in. We'll get back to that as we go. You believe it'll be Josh Allen right now, Domonique? Why?
Yeah, I think Josh Allen gets it done. I think in part because of the story around his season. As they moved on from Stephon Diggs, it felt like this team was a little bit in a reload. Even though they were still projected to win probably 10 games, I think that him having this season, and obviously the fact that Lamar won it last year shouldn't matter, but these are humans making the votes. Yeah. And my guess is Josh Allen edges him out because the story around Josh Allen is probably more interesting, even though I think Lamar Jackson is playing better football.
Tim, why Lamar?
Look, I just think when you look, if we say it's kind of a 2-man race, even though there are 4 guys that probably, have a strong argument, when you look at basically every major quarterback stat that matters, right? Like, so yards, touchdowns, interceptions, Lamar's numbers are actually better. And then you throw in his rushing yards are significantly better. So, listen, on a team that's going to win probably 12 games, and to be leading in all of those categories with the guy that you're being compared, against for the award, I think that matters. More touchdown passes and fewer interceptions, like, that should matter.
I think what cuts against Lamar also is that Derrick Henry exists. And while all of these guys, these quarterbacks specifically, you could say Jamar Chase exists. You could say that the offensive line for Josh Allen is better than the offensive line for these other teams. But I think having Derrick Henry as a known quantity hurts Lamar's argument, not because he makes it that much easier for him, but because we know who he is. It's different than saying the offensive line.
Make a quick case for Burrow.
See, Burrow's having the best year of any of them, and without him, the team is non-competitive. Without Joe Burrow, the Bengals are going to be picking first in this year's draft. Like, I don't care who else. He is doing things historically in terms of quarterback play. I don't think he wins it. That wasn't the question. It was like, who would you vote for? But I think it's also important. Like, people hear this argument wrong. All those guys have a case. All those quarterbacks. I think the quarterbacks are above the running back when they're having this kind of year. But every single one of them has a case. There is not a bad choice among that group. But Burrow is when you talk about most valuable, the way they've played defense this year, I don't think they have a competitive team without him.
I picked Saquon solely because I liked the idea of having 4 different people on the screen.
It's 4 different colors.
I know he has absolutely no chance to win the award, but I'd love to see him break the all-time record.